All right, we are currently back on air. Welcome to episode 3 of A Friend on the Line. This is your host, ʀᴏᴏᴏ. I go by Lay. For those of you who don't know me, I am an intuitive medium. I work with spirit. I relay messages for people. I also conduct energy healing. Those are some of the things that I do, and that was partly what inspired me to start this radio show, A Friend on the Line. And it's been a pretty long hiatus. It's been months long. I think it's definitely been short of a year. It hasn't been quite that long. But with quarantine having come up, I felt like this was the perfect time to come back, especially with a topic that may resonate with a lot of you all pretty prominently, because with so much, alone time, things have become a little bit more intense, and there's been more self-reflection, and some of you may have been having, more intense dreams. And that is what this episode is all about. We are going to dive into dream interpretation. We're going to talk about different types of dreams. We're going to talk about how they relate to the psyche and how they relate to how your intuition may be picking up on different signals, different messages from the universe or spirit, whatever you like to call it. And we will later on be breaking down some dreams live on air. We do have some very special guests, and they've very graciously volunteered to share their dreams with us. For those of you listening, if you have any questions that come up, feel free to comment. I feel that you should be able to join Mixlr chat, and then you should be able to just comment on the stream. And I do have those comments up in case that there is time to address any questions by the end of the show. And I do want to let you know this is my first time doing the whole tech setup on my own. So if any different tech difficulties come up, you already know what's up, but hopefully there will not be any issues during this session. So with that being said, starting off with dreams, I have been interested in dreams for a really long time. Just about everybody has them. So I've wanted to bring this to the air for like a hot minute, but I just felt like, I don't have anybody to talk about this with in terms of like having a guest on, because I did have guests during the previous 2 shows, but I've come to a point where I realized, I can just have guests on and we can talk about it. And it's something that everybody can relate to, as I mentioned, because just about everybody has them. And so I will talk about the different layers of that. But I do want to say everybody is intuitive, and dreams are one way that our intuition can speak to us. And I am psychic and intuitive, and I have visions in waking life. That is how I receive messages from spirit, primarily because I am clairvoyant. For those of you who don't know what clairvoyance is, it's pretty much the ability to see through your third eye. So it's kind of like, that's so Raven, and she has those little moments, and she can see something, and sometimes it is premonitions, but other time it's simply guidance, or it's clarity about a present moment. It just happens to come to me in a very visual way. And so there's a really strong correspondence between like my visions and dreams that anyone can have, and it really comes down to symbols. It comes to the way that things and people in your dreams represent, real life situations, or they could represent a deeper psychological or emotional process that you're going through. So I figured that, for those of you who maybe aren't consciously clairvoyant, or you don't think that you're intuitive, or you haven't really thought about spirit yet, I think that dreams are going to be a really accessible starting point, and I'm really excited for you all to be better able to understand them and to break them down, because we do have those moments when we know that a dream is more significant. I mean, we do have random dreams, but there are often times when we have something really vivid come up, or we wake up like feeling different or really emotional. So we're hopefully going to be able to equip you with the tools that you need after this episode. And, this episode in this series is going to be ongoing. That's my hope and my plan, is to have recurring episodes on dream interpretation. So, we'll continue getting into that. Okay, so that being said, I do want to talk about how dreams relate to different layers of self, or how different layers of self correspond to different types of dreams. Okay, so I had mentioned before that sometimes we have really random dreams, and we don't necessarily feel like they have any import, and you should be able to tell when it's like, it's a dream where it was something weird that you saw that day, or you watched like a weird movie and then something from that movie came up, especially if you watched like something scary, or maybe you ate something funny and it just made you feel weird right before you went to bed. So there's that mundane aspect of self, right? First and foremost, that interacts with the world. This is kind of what we feel on a conscious level. This is our like in your face earthly reality. And so there's that part of us that, is operating from a human perspective, and that is dealing with the earth as a 3D sort of framework, as a 3D reality. So that's kind of, again, the surface level of how we're operating, and that can come into play when it comes to dreams. But beyond that, okay, we're like going steadily deeper. I'm like walking you all through the process. Beyond that, we have conscious thoughts and emotions. And the way that I'm going to relate that to dreams is sometimes things can happen in a very straightforward way where, okay, say in your waking daily life, you know that you have a problem with the person, and then, you know this, you're aware of who the person is, why they bother you, and you just know that they get under your skin. And the way that shows up in dreams, it can be very explicit. It can be very straightforward, where it's like, you're fighting with that person in the dream, or you're talking to them in the dream, and it's just really like a one-to-one like translation. There's not much that needs decoding there. So, that's that second level of conscious thoughts and emotions, things that you're already aware of, things that you already know that you feel. And then, okay, going one step below that, we are going to go to the subconscious aspect of self. These are things that are maybe a little bit buried deeper within your psyche, and then this domain can include repressed thoughts and emotions, and repressed memories can also be housed here. So again, the subconscious, like when we're in a conscious state, we may not be tapping into that, things that we haven't processed really explicitly and really consciously, in words, without having realized it in a very, explicit, thorough manner. Like we may have things that, that are more hidden that can come out into play in terms of, even how we're acting. If you subconsciously are really insecure about something, you may project those insecurities like in your daily life, and you may not even realize it. But hopefully when you're aware that you have this subconscious level of self, you start to notice those things, and you begin to pick up on how you're behaving, and how you may need to unpack some of those things so that your subconscious doesn't become maybe like, clogged with different things that you haven't processed. So I will say again, like repressed thoughts and emotions and memories, there can be things hidden deeper in there, and that includes foundational memories, foundational experiences from childhood, from growing up. Not necessarily just that, even in adulthood you could have had some experiences that can go way back, years back potentially, and that you haven't really processed yet, or that you kind of like picked up and like kind of absorbed into yourself in a certain way, and you've kind of learned to identify with it or to carry that with you. So that being said, we've covered the mundane, we've covered conscious thoughts and emotions, and we've covered the subconscious layer of self. And so I think deeper than that, what, I've kind of written out in terms of like my notes and my different layers of self, and I'm sure there's more than what I'm talking about right now, but beyond that, we also have an intuitive self that connects to the spiritual realm. This is a part of ourselves, you might call it, the soul, or, that part of you that is connected to the higher self, but it's that part of you that is truly you. And it's very much independent of, I would say, like the physical body and this particular human incarnation that you're currently inhabiting. So this intuitive self connects to the spiritual realm, as I mentioned, and it's able to connect to time and space beyond what we immediately interact with on a mundane level. So I'd mentioned earlier that the mundane self, this is what keeps us grounded. This is what keeps us, under the perspective or just under the mode of operation where, this is, I have a life, I'm here in this city and I'm waking up and I'm eating right now and right now I'm itchy, and it's all those different things that have to do with the body and that have to do with what's right in your face and what is a little bit more concrete and tangible. It's just that daily life. And then this is versus like the spiritual self that is very much aware and in tune with the fact that there is so much more beyond mundane reality. So, we're most in touch with this part of ourselves when we're in a state without inhibition. It's like I said, all these different things that can kind of be locked up, especially when you're operating primarily from the mundane aspect. And I will say, I do want to mention that it's not bad to like respect that mundane part of yourself, because if you're not grounded and you're a little bit too deep into the other realms and the other worlds and the other parts of yourself, you may not feel comfortable being on planet Earth. You may just feel distorted and out of touch with reality in a way that isn't necessarily good for your well-being. So again, I'm not saying all these things to say that there's like a hierarchy per se, especially when it comes to living our daily life. But I'm just mentioning that there is an intuitive self that is kind of beyond this reality, and that is something that, again, it takes work sometimes to unpack and to be in touch with. So connecting this to dreams, ideally, when you sleep, you surrender and you can go deeper into that part of yourself, and you can enter into a line of communication with the multiverse or universal consciousness, all that exists, whatever, you want to name that, which is what is greater than ourselves and what we're a part of. So we will talk a little bit more about that, about how to unpack that. And we will talk maybe a little bit more about this intuitive self, because later on we're going to potentially talk about astral travel and what that means. Some of you may be confused, like, wait, Lei, you said something like, we're going beyond time and space and we're time traveling and space traveling and we're going somewhere else. And yeah, we're going to dive into that later on in the episode. This is just sort of the preliminary introduction to those aspects of self and, again, how they relate to dreams. So I mentioned already the mundane self that navigates and processes everyday reality. So again, when you have dreams that seem random, this is the first type of dream that we're going to talk about. It's things that you saw that day, random things you observed. It's just kind of like your brain just kind of like ticking through things that maybe just don't feel fully resolved. It's just like weird little quirks of your day, maybe. So going beyond that, we're going to go into dreams that actually do have some meaning and actually do communicate something. And again, we're going to relate this to that level of self that I mentioned earlier, which was your conscious or maybe even subconscious self, including your thoughts and emotions. So a very common type of dream is a dream that either shows you your hopes or your fears. So it can either be a projection of what you wish for, or it can be a projection of what you're afraid of. So at the end of the day, it's going to show you what you value and what you want and don't want. So again, these dreams could be really straightforward, where it's going to be like, oh, I want a job. This is the type of dream where it's, again, there's like not really much translation needed because it's just very explicit. So say you want a job, and then in your dream, you're dreaming like, oh my God, like I'm in this position, or maybe in real life, like you want to be in a relationship with someone, and in that dream, like you two are together and that person's like confessing their feelings for you. You should be able to tell, like, okay, this is just kind of me enacting like what I want to happen in my brain and in my dreams, because I'm not really getting any of that in reality. So that's, again, like that's a very like one-to-one type of translation. Is just a very like bare bones representation in your dream, because it doesn't require much decoding, again, so it's pretty literal. And then that is opposed to dreams where you actually are maybe compelled to process through symbols. This is where, what I had mentioned before, like let's go with the relationship one. Like you want to be in a relationship, or you're having fears about the relationship. Maybe you had a dream where you were in a tough conversation with the person that you've been thinking about. Well, that can either show up very explicitly in that way, or it can show up as something different, where maybe you are in a dream and there's a flood. Like that's also a very common theme in terms of there's water everywhere, and you might be in a specific place, but the water represents emotions. And so that is something, again, it's not literal, it's not showing you necessarily that person, although that person may be in the dream, but water is something symbolic. It has to do with your intuition, your emotions, like I said. It's something in flow, and if you're overwhelmed by that, if the water is turbulent, that will speak for the most part to your emotional state. So if the water is calm, when you have a good handle on the water in your dream, that generally means you have a good grasp on your emotions. So I hope this is kind of making sense, where, when you get to these types of dreams where it's not as explicit, your psyche is going to communicate through symbols, and it's going to communicate through animals maybe, or places that have some significance to you. Common dream events, like getting your hair cut or losing teeth, or finding yourself naked or alone, like those are super common. And again, you can see it's not explicitly saying like, oh, I'm scared and I'm vulnerable and I feel like I don't have any personal power right now. But when you get down to it and you start to understand things like, what does hair represent? What does teeth represent? Obviously, if you don't have clothes, you're feeling unprotected. Like it comes down to all those different things, and you start to understand, okay, so it's showing me this, like all these symbols that I'm getting, all these sort of visions and scenes that my subconscious is trying to communicate. They're trying to help me understand my emotions better. So, I will say, if you are not as open to the spiritual side of this, and you're more so like, okay, I just want to understand my dreams and figure out, why I woke up naked in school in my dream, like this is at that level. It's about you recognizing how your emotions are playing out in these movies that happen when you sleep. So I will go beyond that now, through those symbolic dreams. And this is where we go, to that deeper level. I had mentioned the part of you, your higher self and in your soul and in your spirit that is in tune. It's almost like an antenna, and you're picking up different things. You're picking up information that you could not rationally know. You're picking up information that doesn't really have to do with the mundane. It's not something that like somebody told you, or like you got some kind of confirmation in a very explicit, tangible way. This is where you may start to have dreams that feel like premonitions. You may see omens in your dream. Someone asked me to mention this, so that's why I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I didn't even think to mention like these dreams of premonition. And so I will say they're probably more rare to get like dreams that foretell of something to come, but obviously you'll know if it happens later on, and you're just sort of picking up on things that are happening in the future. Why? Because time is not necessarily linear, and I will also mention that the future is not necessarily guaranteed as well. Like this applies to intuitive psychic readings also, because you may get a premonition of something, and that may be the most probable future at that point, the most likely outcome, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to pass. And what's happening is that, there's different possibilities or different outcomes, and the moment that you're in right now in time and space, it can potentially connect to that different moment in time and space. Again, it's not like that hasn't happened yet. It's because there's all these different states of time and states of being, if you believe in like alternate universes and everything kind of coexisting, and all of existence being static in a way, and not again chronological in the way that we like to think about it. Then when we talk about dreams and we talk about premonition in general, it's sort of like you picking up existing information from an existing reality, and it may be relevant to your present reality in a certain way, and that is why your intuitive self is picking up on that. And again, that can come up in dreams. Maybe even if you don't think that you are intuitive or that you have these abilities of knowing things, but when you tap into it, I think that a lot of you will realize that you have so much more power and you're so much more capable than you think when it comes to all of that. It's really just about opening your eyes and really trusting and really finally understanding it and being open to any of the messages that come through to you, because the universe speaks in so many different ways, and that does, of course, include dreams. So I wanted to add, in addition to these dreams of premonition, there are past life dreams. So this is something that I don't feel that I myself have personally experienced, but I've talked to a couple of people, and I do, from my knowledge of how souls kind of, if you want to look at it in a linear way, like set up the process before they incarnate, then people, or souls, I should say, like can carry trauma or different experiences from different lives. So again, if you're going to view it in a non-chronological way, it's sort of like there's like a resonance from a different life that has to do with your soul, and it's kind of intersecting with your current reality, your current timeline, and things that you are presently going through. So I will say, especially for people who've had really intense experiences maybe in other lives and those weren't resolved prior or in conjunction to your being in this particular incarnation, like you may actually like wake up already feeling a certain type of way, or you may have already started your life almost feeling like lost or scared of things or haunted, even if for all intents and purposes, you would look back on a rational level and be like, well, I've never experienced anything bad, and like my family upbringing was normal. I didn't really have a negative childhood. Well, it can come down to different life experiences that you've carried with you here, and that some of you may be called to unpack and might be really beneficial for you to unpack. There's different ways that probably some of you have heard of. There's past life regression. For some of you, you may just feel called to meditate and journal what comes up, but it's really about kind of unpacking those things and being open to what comes to the surface from all of these sort of like repressed or non-resolved issues. So again, aside from that, aside from your intuitive self picking up on premonitions, future things, or if you want to say past life dreams or other life dreams, or I'm sorry, other life experiences, there's also telepathy. And I mean, I don't know if you could technically say it's telepathy if it's in a dream, but I will say dream communication, where you may be communicating with a person in a dream, and I will talk about that a little bit more, because this next segment, before we finally go into unpacking our first guest dream, is I've set up a list of questions for you all to ask when analyzing your dream. So the first questions are the what and the why. So it's, what are you doing in the dream, and why are you doing it? Do you know why? Because a lot of the time we don't know what's happening in the dream, or we kind of have a faint sense of motive, or maybe the motive isn't that clear, where it's like, oh, like someone, I was supposed to do something, I had some kind of mission, and it really, that part, even though you're not really sure and you just kind of have a bare feeling about it, like that's important. So you should really know, like, actually, did I feel happy about doing it? Like, was I supposed to do it, or did I want to do this thing in the dream? Like, why was I in this place? Like, what was the premise? Like, it's really about unpacking your dream and breaking it down to, okay, first and foremost, like, what was going on? What was the whole premise of the dream? And so beyond that, we go into location, the next question, the where. And it's really important to break down what kind of place you're in and what it looks like or seems like to you. So if you're indoors, is the building new or is it old? Is the building big or small? Like, are you, again, inside or outside? Like, what is this place like? Is it a place that you know in real life? Like, have you been there? Can you remember it? Or is it somewhere that you've never been? Maybe it's a composite of different places that you've seen. And, if it's a place that you actually have been, let's go back to, if you've been to that place, like, how do you think of that place? Like, a lot of dream unpacking is really you just breaking down these elements and being like, well, how would I describe that? So if you were in your childhood home, it's like, okay, if you're being superficial about your dream, you're just kind of describing it to someone. You're like, well, yeah, I was in my childhood home. But when you really stop and you want to understand it, you think to yourself, you got to pause and think to yourself, well, actually, like, I really hated that house, and like I was really uncomfortable there. Like I just never felt like I belonged there, like I really ever lived there. It just didn't feel right for me. So if that shows up in your dream and that's the location, that's significant, because it's pointing out those emotions for you of a situation probably where you don't feel at home and you feel out of place. So there's going to be that resonance there, and hopefully this is all starting to make sense of how you're relating things and unpacking what things represent to you, because it's really just dreams and visions are just your subconscious or potentially your intuitive self speaking to you through things that you already know. So pay attention to everything you notice, because the little details may be more significant than you thought. So beyond that, we're going to go when. That's the next question. Like, what is the time of day? Daylight dreams usually have to do with things that are conscious. Night dreams can have to do with the subconscious. It's like your subconscious, it's sort of meta, telling you about these things that are kind of hidden for you, kind of buried deeper in your psyche. And then last question, who showed up for you in the dream? And I know a lot of you are probably really curious about this, but why do people show up in dreams? So first and foremost, if it's someone that you know, one possibility, like I mentioned with the house, is that person is showing up because they have to do with how you feel about them. It's something about them that is relevant to the message of the dream. It may not have to do with that person specifically, but it can be like, what is their personality? If it's like someone that you met a long time ago, but you always remember them as being a really kind or caring person, and they show up, like, it's telling you something about care. Maybe you're seeking care in some way. Maybe there's some part of you that's processing what it means to be a kind person. So, again, like, it can represent how you feel about that person, about their character. And I should have mentioned first, but obviously it can represent that person explicitly and how you feel about that person explicitly. But beyond that, if it's like, oh, I don't think about that person at all, then you would have to go to, okay, well, how do I feel about that person? Like, why did they show up? And speaking on that note, it can also have to do with some kind of role that they played, and not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to do with their personality, or your, emotional relationship with that person. It can be like, oh, that person that showed up, like, I wasn't really that close to them, but oh yeah, they were like a firefighter or something like that, or they were a doctor. So if they show up, it's like that, it's that capacity that they were in, like, that is what becomes important in the dream. So I will say that when it does come down to emotional correspondence, dreams can be about people that you have unresolved psychological or emotional issues with and feelings about. It's like I said earlier, like, it may be like someone that bothers you, or someone where you just don't really understand them, and they can be coming up because that part of you inside is really trying to work it out, and trying to resolve that in some way, and to the extent that it's trying to do so at the level of your dreams. And so now we're going to connect back to what I had mentioned earlier in terms of potentially receiving communication from that person energetically, and where you're potentially communicating with that person in dreams. So I'm going to tie this back to how there's parts of ourselves that can be outside the body, or that doesn't necessarily operate from a physical framework. And this is where, we're communicating as well as traveling through time and space, and we're meeting up with people in this astral realm and the spiritual realm, even though that person in real life might be like on the other side of the country. So when this happens, you're gonna have to really use discernment to understand it, if it feels like you're meeting up with that soul and they're communicating something to you in your dream, or if it's really, as I mentioned before, simply just a projection of what you feel about that person. It can be something you're afraid of that person saying to you, or something that you want that person to say to you. But if they're communicating something that feels like a little bit distinct from what you know of them on a personal level, then it could very well be, something about their spirit communicating with you on the subconscious level through the astral plane. So again, for people you don't know, it's a little bit difficult then, and you just will have to think about their personality, because, your brain could just be just creating a character, and then it just comes down to what they seemed like to you, and what they feel like. So that being said, those were all the questions on how to unpack a dream. I mentioned the different dream types, and so I am going to take a 5-minute break, and I'm going to play y'all some music. And I'm going to get the first person on the line, and we are going to interpret her dream, again, using the tools that I've just mentioned, all those different questions, and we're going to really unpack the symbolism. So that being said, go get a drink of water, use the bathroom, because we got about 5 minutes, and I'm going to start playing some music right now. And we are back on. We have our first guest, my good friend ʀᴏᴏ, on the line, and she's going to share her dream with us. So ʀᴏ, if you're ready, say hey and let us know what your dream is.
Hey Lay, thank you for having me. So I had this dream the other day. Basically what happened was I had just arrived in Oakland, and I was there to visit some friends, and it was really like a typical comfortable feeling. Walk to the front door, enter the house, and normally my friends are like all chilling there in the living room, but it was actually really empty, and there was only one of my close friends that was home. And so we ended up just hanging out, talking, all of that for a little bit, and then I was like, I'm really tired from my trip. I think I want to go take a nap, right? So I ended up grabbing all my stuff. My friend helped me with all my luggage and everything, and I ended up going into one of the rooms to take a nap. And it's funny because my friends actually currently live in this place, but her room wasn't the room that she actually lives in now, but in my dream she had moved to this room for some reason. So anyways, yeah, we have all of my stuff, and we're in there putting everything down, still talking and everything, and so I end up laying down to get really comfortable to, get ready for my nap or whatever. And I get super comfy in the bed, like under the covers. I have the bed sheets like all the way up to my shoulders and everything. And we're still talking a little bit, and I'm kind of getting sleepy. My eyes are getting droopy and everything. And then I realize I end up closing my eyes. And then when I open, like, my friend is gone. And then all of a sudden, I'm outside, floating on my bed in the middle of the street on a bunch of water. And it wasn't water like a river or anything like that. It was actually like really still water. And it was like really peaceful, and I realized like in that moment, like I really wasn't freaking out. I was just like, okay, this is weird, but I'm really comfortable and I'm tired, so I really don't want to move right now. And so I was like, okay, I think I'm just gonna lay here for a little bit, even though like, I might end up getting wet. And then I was like, you know what? I think I should probably just get out of the bed right now and just like get in the water. That way I can like get this over with, because I know I'm eventually going to get wet. But in that moment, I'm like going back and forth like, but I'm so lazy and I'm really comfortable. I don't want to like move, right? And then, of course, in that moment, then it starts raining, and I end up getting wet anyways. And I'm literally laying there like, oh great, of course. Like now I'm wet. Like I should have like just gotten up and into the water like when I initially thought about it. But yeah, then at that point, I'm like laying down already like soaking wet, and I'm like, okay, I gotta get out of this. And then I end up like jumping into the water, and then my dream just ends.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. So I want to, go back to the beginning and just like remind us how you feel about that friend who came and greeted you. You said this person is your close friend, and that they're a very comforting presence to you. Is that right? Like it's someone you feel good with.
Yeah, this is one of like for sure one of my closest friends, and I was actually there to like visit her and all my other friends who live in this house, but she's definitely the main person in the house that I'm like going to go see.
Cool. And then that room that came up, that wasn't actually her room, can you tell us, like, who do you know the person that actually lives in that room? Like, is it a real room that's in that house, or sorry, that I can't remember if it's an apartment or a house, but just like in that space, like who's the actual inhabitant of that room?
So, I mean, well, I used to live in this house also. So, I mean, when I lived there, obviously it was somebody else's room, but like currently they have this other housemate that I haven't met. But when I was there and when I entered that room, it didn't feel like it was that housemate's room. Like, it was for sure my friend's room.
Yeah.
Even though her actual room is the one next door. So I don't know why in the dream it kind of like switched rooms.
Yeah. So who was the person living there while you lived there, basically? Like, whose room was it? Even though we know in the dream it was your close friends, but who's it is it actually? And it became that your close friend's room, but who's actually living there before? If that makes sense. Yeah.
So when I was actually living there, it was just another one of my like friends, and like we weren't like super close, but we were like cool housemates and stuff, and we'd always like, hang out here and there and chop shit up, just talk or whatever, but we weren't hella close. But I mean, we were cool, but I had never really been in that room. I had like seen the room before, like stepped in or like peeked my head into the room before, but I had never actually really ever spent time in that room. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Wait, can you say again, how did you feel about the person that lived there, even though you never stepped in?
Yeah, I mean, we were really cool. Like, we would hang out every now and then, but we weren't, like, super, like, the closest of friends or anything. And I mean, to be honest, I did have a little crush on this person, but it was, like, very, like, chill. We were just, like, friends, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, got it. See, I feel like that was important. Like, whose room is it? Like, what is your connection to that room? Because there is sort of like a combo message in terms of like, who did that room actually belong to? And then why is it now in the dream, like your close friend's room, and not the room of this person that, you were cool with and you had a little crush on, but you weren't like super tight with. And so, all of this coming up, I think for some of you, you'll remember earlier I mentioned the water and different elements of this dream are very familiar, hopefully, to some people, and they're very common. Where, we have, first of all, a place where ʀᴏᴏ felt super comfortable. So that's one thing. And she was being further comforted in the dream by her friend. So it sounds like the friend here represents that aspect of a positive relationship, of feeling at home with someone and feeling just very cozy, because ʀᴏᴏ went in bed and she felt very cozy. So it's really like a private space that it seems that ʀᴏᴏ is trying to inhabit, and there's almost like a need, or like she's seeking out like that comfort, because it's like she's trying to compensate for something, or it's like there's probably a relationship that has to do or that is sort of the impetus for this dream coming up, and especially with that room that she was in, having belonged to this person that she had feelings for in real life. What it feels like is that this dream probably has to do with a romantic relationship, or maybe a situation where ʀᴏᴏ might not really know what's going on, or she's seeking comfort in some way, and that's sort of why she's her subconscious self is trying to make herself feel more at home and maybe like not as at odds with the situation. And going into bed, being in a bedroom and being in a bed, that's a place of intimacy. That's our most private space, is being in a bed. So this is really about ʀᴏᴏ's like private internal realm, and her trying to feel comfortable there in light of this relationship situation where she probably doesn't feel resolved, and that's why again it's coming up in the dream. So with ʀᴏᴏ having done that, and then with the water coming up, again, like I said before, water represents emotion. So the fact that she was transported out into the street, let's unpack that. And there's water, and the streets are flooded. So the street versus the bedroom, the street is a very public place. It's very open, especially like if we're talking about the street where there's cars around. And were there cars actively driving ʀᴏᴏ, or no?
No, they were just all the parked cars that were just like filled up streets. And in Oakland streets, like, parking is rough, so the streets are just packed with cars one after another, but there was no moving cars.
Okay, perfect. So everything being in a standstill, it doesn't feel like Ʀᴏᴏ's internal emotional realm is that turbulent. It feels like she's processing these things where she's maybe like aware of it in a certain way, or it doesn't feel overwhelming to her, even though it feels like, your bed doesn't belong in the street. It's like your private emotions and your personal self, like you don't necessarily want that. Again, it's represented in the bed, being out in public, being visible and vulnerable and exposed. So there's that aspect of like Ʀᴏᴏ is dealing with tensions about being exposed in some way. And again, there's something about that where she wanted to feel comfortable, and that was why her dream opened with her being greeted by a friend who makes her feel at home, and she went into the interior of a place where she feels very comfortable, and she lived there, and she liked when she lived there in real life. So that being said, like Ʀᴏᴏ's attitude about the water is really important. So again, I mentioned like unpacking how you feel. It's very important. How do different elements of the dream make you feel? So Ʀᴏᴏ was very aware that there was water, and she wasn't freaking out. She didn't necessarily want to go into the water. So again, the fact that there was a flood, like there's very strong emotions and they're very potent because again, it's a flood. It's not a trickle of water, but she's not drowning. The water is pretty still. I think you mentioned that, and the cars are still. So again, it's not very chaotic. It's a very particular feeling and mood for her dream. And so with that being said, Ʀᴏᴏ's whole attitude there is like she's kind of aware of it and she's reluctant. So it's showing Ʀᴏᴏ, this dream is showing Ʀᴏᴏ, okay, you're a little bit reluctant to kind of get yourself wet and to really, further expose yourself to like all your emotions and to really absorb those things and to really be present with them. Like again, her being in the bed, it's her seeking solace and maybe some kind of escape or comfort in light of what is a very strong emotional situation for her. And so the rain starting to come down, that is the point in the dream at which it becomes clear that getting wet is just inevitable. So at some level, her subconscious self or her emotions understand that at some point she is going to have to deal with the situation. She's going to have to deal with her emotions about the relationship. And that was why Ʀᴏᴏ also had that attitude too of like, well, maybe I should just get up and just get wet already. So all of those things really come into play, and they show a certain level of awareness, and I would say like maturity from Ʀᴏᴏ, that she knows what's going on. And I feel like, especially when you unpack your dreams, then she becomes aware, and you all become aware if you're unpacking your dreams, of just kind of what attitude you're taking to the situation and what kind of perspective you bring. And so I think that was a pretty straightforward dream. I really liked this one from Ʀᴏᴏ because it has such common dream elements of like, it's somebody's house and you don't live there anymore, and there's someone that and you have to unpack like, why is that person there? And it just felt, and I'm tapping into these readings intuitively a little bit, and it just, from Ʀᴏᴏ's feeling, her relationship with that friend in real life, the one who came to greet her, isn't really in question, and neither is her relationship with the person who used to live there. It's all sort of, again, symbolic of, the dream relating to a romantic relationship with a different person in real life in the present moment. And again, Ʀᴏᴏ in the present moment, seeking comfort and trying to find a way to make herself comfortable, but knowing that at some point she will be exposed to these emotions. She will be exposed to the water, and that she will probably, I think you did get up at that point, right? When it started to rain.
Yeah, when it started to rain, I was like, okay, well now I'm wet, so now I just have to like get out of bed.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we actually just broke that down pretty quickly. So I think I covered all the main elements, unless there's something that you can think of where you feel like you don't understand what happened in the dream. I mean, I'm hoping all of this makes sense for you, Ʀᴏᴏ.
No, yeah, I think that the way that you connected everything did definitely make sense, and I never really understood why I only had my one good friend there. But how you broke that down, that actually makes sense, because that's who I felt comfortable with. So, yeah, no, thank you for that. That was informative.
Okay, thank you.
That was real.
Okay, awesome. I'm glad that was clear, Gabri. I'm so happy that it helped clarify some things for you, and just kind of help you better understand like what are your emotions trying to say, like what is your subconscious trying to bring to you, trying to bring to a conscious level. So I want to thank you again for sharing that dream. It was a perfect dream to analyze. Again, I feel like hopefully a lot of listeners tuning in can relate to sort of the setup of the dream and different things that happen. So thank you again, Gabri. And we will have a second guest after another brief musical break. So that being said, take 10 minutes and we will be back on the air. Okay, we are back on this time with our next guest, another friend of mine, V. Thank you so much for also volunteering to come on air and come on live and let us know about your dream. So with that being said, V, we would love to hear about your dream.
Hi, Lei. Thanks for having me. Alrighty, so with my dream, it's this one colossal island in the sky that's actually been a recurring theme across different separate dreams that I've had recently, particularly during this pandemic. So with this main island, what you see is like a giant stately palace that's been like adorned with vines and greenery around the area. And for me, when I was in that dream, I was in the courtyard outside, and you can just see like really shimmery water paths and waterfalls. And when you look up at the sky, it's like it's filled with rainbows and it's quite iridescent. And I just felt this kind of sense of like pristine, serene tranquility around that place. So that's the main island. And in recent dreams, I've been jumping from these different kind of islands that feature a certain body of water. Like for instance, I am on a different island and I'm on a cliff looking at a vast ocean. And then on another island in another dream, I'm on a small oasis. And what's been happening across all these dreams is the characters that happen to be there, like randos or like relatives there, refer back to my time at this main island. And I feel like across all these dreams, there's not necessarily a plot or some kind of problem to resolve. And I am mostly just trying to figure out what's happening around me. But I wouldn't say that they're aimless either, and that I'm still moving along the scenery. So that's been a recurring dream of mine during this time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, V, for sharing. Now, as a lot of you can tell, this dream is really different from the first one. The first dream, Gabri's dream, there was definitely like a plot. It was a place that was definitely more intimate and more familiar. It was very grounded in some real life experiences that she's been in real life places and people. And this dream that V has just shared with us is it's almost like abstract, and it's like they're going to a different place that doesn't, like, as far as I know, yeah, you've never been to these islands, right? Like, and that you could remember, like.
I've never seen like a sky like that opalescent, so yeah. Not that I know of.
Yeah, it was definitely otherworldly, right? I mean, that's how it feels to me.
Yes.
Okay,
definitely.
Perfect. And so V, I want to double check that I still have your consent to go into this intuitively. I did have a feeling that I would have to do that for this dream, but I'm in a space now where I'm ready to relay that information. I just, again, want to make sure that you're okay with me, sharing whatever information comes up to me on an intuitive level.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be a yes for me.
Okay, perfect. I mean, I know we talked about it before, but I just like to be really sure. But I'm getting really excited. And like, this is that part where those of you kind of stuck through it, you're going to this is that like woo kind of portion of the radio show, because this is like where I'm hoping y'all have open minds, because I'm getting a lot of different information about V's travels. So I just actually picked up on something really significant. That's why, like, V, I hope you're cool with this, but I was just getting a really strong feeling of Pleiades when they were talking, and Pleiades, if I remember correctly, it's a star system, or it's a particular star. But I will mention, for those of you who maybe weren't aware or aren't familiar with it, but not every soul begins their incarnation on planet Earth, and that there are actually different, places, different planets, or again, like I've said, there's also like star systems. Actually, I don't know about planets. All I confirm from what I've experienced and witnessed intuitively is different star systems. So that being said, I'm getting the feeling they're telling me now, like, V is Pleiadian, and so V's soul, it feels like it resonates very strongly with this sort of like star system, this star place. Like it's very far away. Pleiades is an actual, it does exist like in the universe, but I will say, for those of you who like don't believe in aliens, I mean, it's kind of a real thing, or at least in the sense that there's spiritual life beyond life as we know it on this planet, on planet Earth. Man, I wish I had some like cool sound effects. I would kind of play something like ooh, eerie right now, some kind of like UFO themes. But V Soul, just kind of what I'm getting. V Soul visits this place and these places because they are just super familiar to them. It just feels like home for V. It feels like a place that V Soul has gone to and traveled to and relaxed in. It's a place of play and of leisure. That's what I'm getting for V. It's just like, it's almost like V is like relaxing in a warm bath, and that palace is a place that V is very comfortable in. And I see them almost like, rubbing themselves off with a towel, like if they went for a swim, or, if they took a bath. Like it's a place that V's soul feels very at home in. And so I want to translate, and I want to bring this back to those of you listening. And so if some of you have had dreams in places where you've never been there in real life, that may be, if it seems earthly, it could be it has to do with the past life, or it could just be a place. It may be that your soul has like there's something called remote viewing. So it could be that your soul has chosen this place that maybe actually exists, and chooses to enact a scene there in the dream, or to process things in that space psychically. But what I'm getting for V is like, and for some of you, this may feel resonant, but it's like if you're seeing something that feels almost like unreal, it feels like you're in a place that is just like you don't think that you could possibly find it on planet Earth. And may be the case that your soul has traveled to other places. And this is especially prevalent when you're in between, incarnations, and when souls, maybe, if you've been human for a long time, and that's been predominantly like what your incarnations have been like. In between, again, if we're going to look at time in like a linear way, your soul can travel into many different places in the astral realm. And again, there's some connections between like the astral realm and like what shows up in sort of like the fabric of our actual reality and how the universe actually is. I do apologize if this sounds super abstract. I'm trying to explain this as best as I can, and there are actually some mysteries that I don't even know of or can really explain fully, because they're deeper than what I at this present moment understand. So I will put that disclaimer out there. But I just get the very strong feeling that V soul actually does astral travel when they sleep. So for those of you who've experienced this, hopefully this brings up some newfound clarity for you. And I just hope it brings things to new light for those of you who have visited these ethereal places, or places that just feel like, like they belong to a different place. And especially if they're recurring, that's like super significant, and you should, or you don't have to, but you're totally welcome to sit down. And especially, like, I would advise those of you listening in to keep a dream journal if you haven't already, and especially to describe it as best as you can, because if you sit and meditate with those descriptions or those journal entries, you're going to probably get some more information about about these places that have come up. So yeah, I'm going to tap in and see if there's any further information that they want to impart to V. I just felt like, I didn't fully go into this dream in my prep with V prior to the show, but now I'm like kind of tapping in. I had a feeling I would start to talk about astral travel, but that is essentially what has been going on in these dreams. Because you said, these come up for you from time to time, right, V? Where you go to these different islands?
Yeah, and even the characters throughout like the different dreams keep referencing back and forth to these different islands because they mention the key feature of each island, which is like the different bodies of water.
Okay, awesome. So do you have any questions about anything that I just said in terms of like unpacking what's going on here? I know I didn't actually break down many of the details of the dream. I basically just told you. This was very different from the first one, which was pretty cut and dry. But this one is it delves a little bit more into the spiritual aspect of our lives and how our spirits operate, especially when we are in a sleep state. Do you have any questions? Yeah. So do you have any questions that I said that?
I do not. This is actually quite a lot to digest in one sitting.
I know.
Yeah, no questions.
Okay, perfect.
I have like smaller details if you want to look into that, but for the most part, I think your answer gave the gist of it.
Okay. So I think we're good for now. I think that was like the main kernel, and that was really what spirit and like your guides wanted to impart to you. I feel like V, if you want to chat about this with me, offline, off air, we can totally do that, because I know I may have mentioned some things that you may not be familiar with, and I'm happy to further clarify them for you, especially since you were so kind to volunteer to come on air and to share this dream experience with us. So V, thank you again. I really appreciate it, and let me know, off air if you have any questions and want to chat about this.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye, V.
Bye.
Okay, so thank you all for joining me for the dream breakdown portion of the show. That was a lot. Like, I honestly did not expect this session to go on this long. So rest assured, like, we are at the final announcement portion. Really quickly, I will say that for those of you who have trouble sleeping, or if you want to dream more or have clearer dreams, I would recommend first and foremost trying to clear your emotions and any disruptive mental energy while you're in a conscious state, so that you are better able to sleep and you are better able to slip into that unconscious state of mind, because it's like, if you're kind of jittery and you're like all over the place before you go to bed, you're probably not going to get great sleep, and you're probably going to be restless while you sleep. So if you have trouble doing that, try to clear your mind and clear your energy. Maybe just like have a wind down before you go to bed. And if you feel like you don't remember your dreams at all, I will say you can definitely ask spirit and your spirit guides to communicate with you in dreams. Spirit loves to communicate with us, and you can actively request information and guidance from them. It can really depend on just what mode of communication you prefer. Some people may prefer or just will receive signs from spirit through physical objects that appear. It could be like feathers, or it could be animals that show up, or it could be numbers that frequently show up. Some of you may be familiar with angel numbers. But if you want them to communicate to you through dreams, you can ask for them to talk to you that way. So, moving on, if you do have trouble interpreting your dreams, I mean, if you've already tried journaling and all of that and used or asked yourself some of those important questions that I mentioned earlier, I do now have a brand new service, which is dream interpretation. So if you need any assistance, or actually if you want to come on air and share your dream and we can break it down, please let me know, because I do want this to be a recurring series, and I am actively looking for guests to come onto the show. And if y'all do not follow me on social already, I do plan on posting more dream content. I have the same username pretty much everywhere. It's ʀᴏᴏᴏ. If you have trouble with that, it's just you spell it like you say it, ʀᴏᴏᴏ, and then my name, Lei, Ley, and it's basically means magical in Tagalog, which is the Filipino language. And so you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on Instagram, you can find me on YouTube. I do want to start posting videos on energy and intuition soon. My latest video was a pick a card tarot reading on quarantine guidance for different groups. So if you feel called to watch that video, go ahead and take a look and subscribe if you feel so called to. And for those of you who you're very into these types of subjects and you want to see different things, like I would love to hear your suggestions for content. And if you have any particular questions about dreams or spirituality, I'm very much open to that. And you all can message me or you can email me. You can look at my site, which is just ʀᴏᴏᴏ.com, if you want more information on who I am, what I want to do, and if you want to get in contact. And so I do plan to be back on the air in 2 weeks. It will most likely be on dreams again, so stay tuned for that. I will be posting just to confirm it, and so just keep an eye out for that. I do also have a newsletter on my website if you all just want the emails straight to your inbox, and I will alert you when I'm just doing these big projects, or if I've added anything new or have anything big coming up. And so I do want to thank you all, for those of you who've listened live, those of you who are listening now, maybe after the fact. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for your support. I do hope that this was clear and helpful for all of you. I really appreciate you sharing this space with me. And again, let me know if you have any questions. I hope you all have a good night. I'm going to leave you with one song before the end of the session. Take care, and till next time.